Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I'm talking with Dr. Gregory Popcak. He and his bride Lisa co-host More to Life, a call-in program produced by Ave Maria Radio and EWTN, and frankly one of the fastest hours in Catholic radio that provides helpful advice for families from the perspective of the theology of the body and counseling psychology. They are also the producers of the CatholicHOM network and app. And download it, be a part of the network, and flourish as a family together. Greg, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So today we are talking about taking your children, your little children to Mass. I want to ask for you to speak to perhaps the core issue here, which is that children ought to be brought to Mass from a young age to be inducted into the spiritual life of their parents. All considerations aside, that's a core reality. So I invite you to speak to that first.
Yeah, so I think that there's some thought that somehow children shouldn't be brought to Mass until they're able to really understand what's going on. But I think that really robs them of the opportunity to begin to be socialized to what happens at church. And, that long before children can cognitively appreciate what's going on around them, they are picking up on the rhythms of things and participating in kind of the atmosphere of it all. And, as we bring our children to church, even though it might seem like they're wiggly and they're noisy and they're not getting a lot out of it, what we're doing is we're creating, if you will, we're sort of creating a folder in their brain where we can download over time the information about how do we behave there and what do we get out of it and how can we learn from the experience, as opposed to just sort of waiting until we think that the children are, old enough, quote unquote, to really understand it and then trying to do it, because then we're trying to do too much at once, right? We're trying to create that folder all at the same time while filling it with information. And I think that it's much better to really start early. And in fact, once children are baptized, they belong. They are part of God's family. And so it's important to really include our children.
We can also acknowledge that there is a threshold. It's not like I'm a father of little children, and so I want to be the first to acknowledge that being silent and sitting still for over an hour at Mass is a challenge for young children. So there is a threshold here between the parental responsibility, but also a spirit of accommodation, and it works hand in hand with each other. Can you please speak to that?
Yeah, I think that making sure that we're able to adjust our focus. I think one of the things, Mark, is that the parents struggle with, is that I hear a lot of times from parents saying that, well, when I brought my kids to Mass, I didn't get anything out of it. It's hard.
Ooh.
Right, and I think that what we need to realize, and I heard Father Mike Schmitz talk about this, and I thought it was particularly beautiful. He said, Mass is ultimately about offering sacrifice. And the sacrifice that we can offer as parents is realizing that the thing we get out of Mass is helping our kids learn to get something out of Mass. There are other ways for us to attend to our spiritual needs, and making it all about, well, just this 1 hour or so on Sundays is the only way I'm going to get myself fed, is missing the point. That really, when we're bringing our children to Mass, the real joy is, what can I do to help my children learn to get something out of this? And so if that becomes my focus, instead of how do I shut them up, how do I keep them still, how do I stop them from, so that I can get something out of this, then I'm able to really enter into a different kind of experience of the Mass, where I'm starting to learn to see it through their eyes, and I'm starting to learn to see, how can I really help them fall in love with Christ and with the Church, and really use this time for that. And I think that becomes a much more rewarding experience then.
Can you also speak to the fact that what we think the children get out of Mass sometimes differs from what they actually get out of it, and therefore readjusting our expectations is also crucial?
Well, that's right. And so that's what I was talking about in terms of, seeing it through their eyes is really important. And so I think that requires a little bit of preparation at home, too. So, for example, reading children's Bible versions of the Sunday Mass readings can be very helpful. Doing things like identifying a word that maybe occurs through a couple of different readings, or maybe 2 words that that occur throughout the Mass, that we can make the word of the week, and when they hear that word, they just kind of give us a little tug on our sleeve, or they just give us a little pat that says, "I'm paying attention," and we can praise them for that paying attention to those things. Finding ways to bring, say, very soft books. There are a lot of cloth books that have Bible stories. Or even soft toys that are, have dolls of the saints, for example, or other Bible characters that the children can play with in the pew, that we reserve just for Sundays. Like, instead of just bringing whatever their favorite toys are from home, having a special going to Mass bag that has activities that they only do on Sunday. So that keeps those things special, but they're also religiously oriented, so they can kind of keep on theme, even if they're not specifically on topic. That we're creating that atmosphere and that experience for the kids, that this is special, that we have special activities that we do in this special place that we just do at this time, really starts to send that message of how to approach the liturgy. And how to think about going to Mass differently than say, this is just another thing that we're going to, that we have to get you through.
From there, like you mentioned, there are a few other resources, like a children's missal, a children's Mass book, different things that can help stoke their imagination. So I want to ask if you could also offer some counsel as to how to help build the imagination about Mass, especially over the week preparing for Mass.
Well, I honestly, this is going to be a surprise, but I think that parents who have regular family meals with their children do have a better experience of Mass as well, because we're teaching children to be still and be at the table, and participate, for example, in grace, and participate in the conversation. Like, there are a lot of families who, during family meals, if the kids get a little wiggly, we just let them down and run around the house. But that doesn't really socialize our kids to kind of learning how to be still and to be part of something that's bigger than them. And I think having those meals, those daily, if possible, dinners together as a family, where you pray together and you're talking together and you're helping the kids kind of get through that experience by letting them have other activities that they can do that are appropriate at the table, that allow them to stay there for the entire family meal instead of just whenever they've had a couple of chicken nuggets and then they can get down and run around. I mean, being able to do that is a really important part of it, but also a regular family prayer, so that we have a daily time of prayer together where we read something from the children's Bible, for example, or the children's missal, or and we talk about that together as a family, and we pray together as a family in ways that really enable us to draw closer to God and to each other through that experience. The making these kinds of sacramental activities part of our family life really help our kids begin to understand that what they're experiencing at Mass is an extension of the way we worship God at home, not necessarily the only way we worship God. And when we leave home, right? So, in fact, the research that we did, I've talked about this on the program before. The study we did of Catholic families who successfully raised all of their kids to faithful adulthood. The adult children who were part of that study said that a lot of what made Mass and all the other things they did, religious education, stick, was that they saw it as an extension of what they did as a family. That it wasn't the thing that they did when they left. Religion wasn't something they did when they left home. It was something they did at home, and then was supported by their participation in Mass or religious education or youth group. Unfortunately, I think for a lot of Catholic families, the opposite is true. That our kids don't experience the faith really at home in any meaningful way. It's this another activity that's on the list of things that we do, and that tends to undermine the ability for those activities to actually stick on a personal level. Really, what we do personally, or what we own personally, comes from the relationships that we have in the home and how we live out our faith in the home and how that faith supports those relationships.
Well, Greg, that just about hits the nail on the head, that the intimacy of the family in their expression of faith throughout the week is what overflows into Mass, and children sense that, they understand that. Thank you very, very much for your time, Greg. I greatly appreciate this.
Always a pleasure.
My guest has been Dr. Gregory Popcak. He and his bride Lisa co-produced the CatholicHOM app, Households on Mission app. Find out how you can immerse your life in faith as a couple into the life of your children so that the whole family is drawn into it and enjoys Mass together. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.